Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here for this month's episode of the Thrive by Five podcast, hosted by Family Futures. I'm Corey Holcomb, your host, and I want to thank you for being here. Well, we are officially in June season, which we're celebrating a few different things this month, but one thing we celebrate is Father's Day. We like to give love to the dads, shout outs to the dads, because the dad voice sometimes can get a little quiet when talking about early childhood development. The first segment of today's podcast, I invited one of our family support navigators, Matthew Selmon. Matthew, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was excited to hear your perspective on the dad experience. But one thing I think I always ask everyone, especially someone who works here, what does a family support navigator do?
As a family support navigator, we mainly work with families if they need resources. We help them with the ages and stages questionnaire. And it gives you good insight as far as this is where my child is. Here are some things that they can work on. There are certain questions that will be asked, like, have you seen your child do this? Have you seen your child do that? So it's very parent driven and led as far as you seeing where your child is, and then, okay, this is where I can continue the work. So as a family support navigator, my role in that is just helping them and guiding as far as this is where your child is. I'll send activities, and if they would like any more further support, like for instance, if there's an area where they could be working on speech a little bit more, or the parent might want more support, I could come alongside. It's like, okay, here are some things that could probably be helpful just to continue in the growth.
That's really great. It does give a really personalized approach because parenting journeys are based on the people. It's not like one size fits all,
Yeah.
but it's great that you're the person on the ground connecting everything we do, the bigger mission of what we do, to the people. And I think that's really great. Now, I know you're a parent now, but
Yeah.
when you started here, you weren't a parent yet. What was your background before you came to Family Futures, and how did all that kind of lead you here?
So I was a teacher. I got started getting involved in early childhood back in 2017. But I've always had a passion for wanting to help within the community and wanting to support, but also I have nieces and nephews. I've been a camp counselor, always having a heart for wanting to work with families and specifically with children, just because this time is very crucial for children between ages 0 to 5, and that's preschool and infant toddler age. Just being a teacher, being in early childhood, being able to be a support and be able to be involved in helping young minds in their growth and even families is really important. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started in being in early childhood.
I love that. And now here you are. We were just talking about our kids before we even hit record, where
Yeah.
your daughter Hazel, she's 16 months old. And then I have Harrison, my son, who is 8 years old. So we were kind of talking about the differences and where we are at the parenting stage.
Yeah.
And still looking at all those Facebook memory photos every single night as a picture, as a review of pictures. And that's what parents do now. I was thinking about the experience we have as being dads now in this world, in a society that's more in line with parenting roles, about working families and everything, and thinking about the kind of fatherhood experience you had growing up. What was that like?
My dad was very involved looking back. Both my parents were, but it's just very important because my dad was very he was at basketball games, he was at soccer games. I did piano, so he was there, just very present. And also, the one thing that really helped me is that he was there to listen, still gave advice, but he was there to really listen. Both of them were, but I really appreciated how important a father is and just how important having a father there contributes. Just the main thing I always took away, he always listened, but always let me know how I need to go in a direction in a different way. Just being present. I know I have a dad, but just also being involved in my life and taking an interest was very, very important.
Yeah, my dad experience is so different. My biological father was not in the picture hardly at all. But my mom married my stepdad when I was 4. And so in many ways of my life, he is my dad.
Yeah.
And my mom passed away when I was 17. And so my dad, he was, for my whole life, he was always the provider. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. He was always accessible, and I could go to him, but he was still the provider. So most of his time was spent putting food on the table, paying the house payment, doing the typical man things.
Yeah.
But he was there as he could be.
Yeah.
And then his role changed, and he kind of took a more committed role, more focused role when he realized that we didn't have one of our parents now, so we needed that support. And that kind of changes things as well. And of course, every person has a different story.
Everyone
Some people
does,
have 2 dads, some people have no dads, some
Right.
people have father figures, and all these things shape us and our perspectives. Thinking about your experience with your dad and what you took away from that. How has that fatherhood element changed you in terms of your perspective, your priority, your personal growth, stuff like that?
With Hazel, I always want to emphasize, even when I leave home, I'm always thinking about Hazel, my wife, and just, but as far as talking specifically about Hazel, like even when I leave, Hazel knows I'm leaving because I work from home. So she always knows when I'm leaving. She's like, bye bye, dada. And then it's like, oh, man.
Can't leave now.
So I always want to make it a priority. And like when I get home, which I could be like very tired, I could be very like, it's been a long day, but it's still important for me to spend time with Hazel. And every once in a while, like sometimes I'll kind of like, oh, something's on my phone. She'll try to get my attention. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I need to put my phone down. So still being intentional, spending time with her and just interacting, playing with toys, but also if she gets kind of, as far as working through like her emotions and what's going on, because there are times like she gets up in the middle of the night and she might have had a bad dream or she just needs comfort. So just being willing to do that as well still helps in that way as far as being involved and knowing, okay, daddy's here to still comfort me. And being involved in that way creates a lot of emotional support at the same time.
That's great. It really does. And one thing I learned in my dad journey is that being a good dad is an intentional choice. Being a parent in general is a very self-sacrificing thing. I don't know about you if you have friends who don't want to have children or don't feel that calling on their life and they say, I'm too selfish of a person to have a child. But even before I had a child, my buddy Ben said, it never makes your life easier, but it always makes her richer.
Yeah.
That's kind of my mode and my thought process for my whole parenting journey is that it's never easy and there are challenges every single day.
Always changing.
There are challenges, especially being a dad, because there are days where, especially those early years, where your child wants mom more because mom is the nurturing caregiver, you know? Or
But here's the funny
so what?
I was gonna say that, but that's the funny thing. So I could be on the floor, Rachel could be on the couch, and then like something happens, or like I come in, she'll go to mom, but she wants to look at me at the same time. So the funny thing about it is just that like, she may not always want to come to me or anything, but she wants to know I'm still there. Me and Rachel always laugh about it. She'll go to Rachel, but then she'll like, where's is dad at? Okay. And then she'll start interacting. Like I'll try to come to her. It's like, hey, Hazel, like, oh, let me go to mommy and then look at me and then start talking. I'm like,
That's so funny. And that is, kids are such personalities. I remember early on, we taught Harrison like how to play like jokes and kind of like mess around with each other. And so we always tell the story about Harrison when he was younger, and we'd get home and he'd go open the garage door for us, like, and he'd go, hey, buddy. And then you'd hear him slam the door and run away laughing. Like, just like, what a little butthead, you know?
Yep.
I mean, I love my child, but I can call him a butthead because.
Right. Yeah.
But one thing I wonder too, it's got to be such an experience being a girl dad, because I think about what it's like, you know, we were having a son. I was like, okay, I was excited either way, but like I have I know how to be a boy. So I know this. When you found out you were having a girl, what kinds of things were going through your head? Did you feel less equipped? Were you more nervous about having a girl?
Not as much. So I have two sisters and one brother. I've been around my sisters a lot and my mom. When I heard that I was going to have a girl, you start to think ahead, like how it's going to look later. I have a daughter. Just you start thinking ahead with things. But I guess in the present, it wasn't really much of a difference, I would say.
Sure.
So I was looking forward to it.
I don't know if you're like me, but one of the funnest things, one of the biggest joys in the parenting journey for me is your wife just gives birth and you hold this beautiful kid in your arms and you're like, I just can't wait to get to know you.
Yep.
Like, I can't wait to figure you out and just understand everything that's about you.
Yep.
My son is in a lot of ways very much like me, but he's still his own person, and he's very much a daredevil and a sporty kid, and very physically active. And so it's such a cool experience to see like little parts of yourself in this little person you help bring into the world, but then also to see, wow, you're actually your own person and you're figuring things out. And that's your mom right there. That's definitely your dad right there. And I think those things are really, really special.
Yep.
Now, I know being a dad, I know there's days where I'm sure you feel this way where end of the day, you're like, man, did I do the right thing? Did I mess up with my kids somehow? Did I screw them up a little bit? And I always make the joke that I'm paying for therapy eventually. So got to get a few zingers. I'm joking. But I think about your experience, like kind of being a little more vulnerable with this, but Thinking about the barriers that kind of prevent you from being the dad you want to be. I feel like to a good extent you are the dad you want to be, but I'm sure there are things you're like, I got to work on this. What are those things?
Yeah, one of those things sometimes, as far as I always want to see like how she's growing and developing, but sometimes I may not catch something as far as like how she may respond, like she's trying to communicate now. So for instance, because we have things in our bathroom, we try to tell her not to go in there. She was pointing to it. I was like, Hazel, you should not go in there. And then she kept doing it. And then she kind of got frustrated about it. And it was like, oh, okay, Hazel, it's all. And then she kept doing it again. And I was like, I see what she's saying, because we closed the door. So she's pointing to it like that the door is open. So just thinking about, like you were saying, just jokingly, like, oh, we have to pay for therapy later. Because that is an example of, oh, I could have handled that differently, or I could have did this differently. I think, and I'm realizing pretty much all parents think about that in ways in which I could have did this, I could have did that, and even picking up certain cues too. So in that way, that's what I would kind of say.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge for me is just recognizing my own limitations of my mental health and being consistent with that. So I grew up in a home that was a lot of yelling and a lot of spanking, a lot of physical punishment. And so I still carry a lot of that anxiety, and I don't hit my kid, of course, because I was that child. I did not want to do that. And so for me to recognize when I need to step away, because for me, the natural response is to escalate and to yell and to create stress on him. So for me, the biggest challenge I face is my mental health and just knowing when to say, okay, I need to step away for 5 minutes. Just recognizing your limitations. And sometimes, like I know you said earlier, like when you're to get home and you're exhausted, but you still play with your kid. Sometimes I need to say, okay, give me 15 minutes of myself because I need that before I can be fully present for you.
And I even think like we were saying about mental health, I kind of look at it this way. First, when you get married, you're learning more about yourself, and there are things about yourself you didn't realize. And it's like, oh, I need to work on this. Then when you have a child, that's the next thing. It's like, oh, there's some other things I got to work on. And I have a counselor. So just having a counselor during this time, it's been helpful for me.
Most definitely. Yeah. The other part of that too is, as a father, you're responsible for helping your child understand how to regulate their emotions, but you're also kind of have to keep an eye, and not that you're responsible for your wife's happiness by any means, but you're also trying to be cognitive of what she needs and how she needs it. And sometimes just be like, hey baby, okay, like do you need to go out for a bit, go have a girls' night or something, or do you need to like go get a coffee for yourself, go shopping, do something for you that's just your own for a little bit. I got this. And I think that's part of the challenge too. I wonder, thinking about your experience as a dad, do you feel like that helps equip you more to do your work here in terms of how dads are looked at and how they help their kids succeed in our programs?
Yeah. When I talk to a dad, just being able to understand where they're coming from or just what they're asking for, and just being able to understand it is important, because they understand like, okay, I know you know what I'm talking about, and because I've been there too. And starting to have the Black Fathers Cafe coming up.
Yeah.
Being able to have opportunities to do that, and being involved with Dad's Count Coalition too. We were talking about mental health and everything the father's going through mental health wise, and being able to talk about that and have a space to talk about that, but also having things to be able to support fathers as well, and being involved with that, being here at Family Futures and the groups I'm involved in creates a really big impact in that way.
Yeah, I didn't mean to even ignore that part of that, but as a man, as a Black man, the experiences you have in the world are different than the ones I have, and the scope of fatherhood is different too. So I think that's great. How has your work in the community and helping families changed you and informed you as a dad?
A lot of the families that I've worked with, for example, that will talk to me about my child may not kick yet or may not do this yet, and they're like about 4 or 5, and I was there. There was a time when Hazel wasn't really, like, one of the signs is clapping, and we were like, oh, she's not really clapping yet, but she's doing everything else, but she's not clapping. She's clapping now. But it's just being able to hear parents who have the same concerns. It helps me realize, don't be so hard on yourself, just still keep an eye, but it's still a journey, and help me just continue to see it's a journey. So yeah.
Awesome. Before we close off, the one thing I wanted to ask you is if you could give one piece of advice to new fathers, what would that be?
For fathers, I would say be intentional about making time with your child. And if you're a father that's concerned about the bonding experience with your child, I would say give it time. And that can look differently for every father. Being intentional about time, you may not be able to see it now, but it pays off later. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Matthew, thank you so much for being here today. It was great to talk to you and get to know about your experience as a dad, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thanks.
Everyone, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Thrive by 5 podcast. We're continuing our Father's Day special episode, talking with dads and dads' experiences and father figures. My next guest on the podcast today is the founder, president of All Things Fatherhood, Clay Roberts. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's talk about All Things Fatherhood. Tell us about the organization.
So we got started about roughly a year and a half ago. I honestly really can't take full credit for the idea of All Things Fatherhood as far as a nonprofit organization is concerned. It honestly kind of just happened. I wrote a book called Super Dad about my experiences as a single father and dealing with the child support system. And so after writing that book back in 2023 and releasing it, I had decided that I was going to start like a YouTube podcast channel and just interview fathers and let that be that, right? But this big brain of mine works very fast, and it basically told me, hey, I think you could probably do a documentary. So I put out a casting call for some fathers that wanted to talk about their experience as fathers, and we called it generational fatherhood because I was trying to get fathers from all different walks of life throughout the generations. And during filming, the first half of the film is all basic interviews for individuals. Then the second half is group discussions. And in that group discussion, a lot of the fathers really enjoyed it. They felt it was therapy. They felt that it was needed and necessary. So they asked me to continue the group sessions going. And from there, All Things Fatherhood was born. And so we started out as a support group, hosting monthly meetings once a month. And then we pulled off our first event in the spring, called the Dad and Kids Mixer in 2024 in April. And then it just kind of snowballed from there, man. And we have done a lot of great things up to this point. I've held a lot of different events, such as our Father's Day barbecue, which is coming back up again here pretty soon. We have several partnerships with different organizations. I'm part of the Dad's Count Coalition now. We just completed our proactive fatherhood program in partnership with the prosecuting attorney's office in Kent County Friends of the Court. So we are slowly but surely rolling out a lot of good programs within our organization. And honestly, I have those guys in that film to thank for where I'm at with this organization today.
I love that so much. And it's helping fill such a void that I think is really needed. Every person's fatherhood journey is different, and you think about, because you're a father as well, so thinking about how the things in your life, your experience with your parents, the experiences you had around you with father figures, and how they inform what you do. Let's talk a bit about the state of fatherhood here in Kent County. What is your takeaway from that so far?
Oh, for me, I believe the state of fatherhood in Kent County is going through a critical transformation. I do believe that the narratives that have been centered around fatherhood have been falsely misrepresented. Most fathers truly want to be there for their kids. The problem with that is that there's an overall lack of resources and understanding about what being a man in fatherhood actually looks like. And for, I would say, too long, it was still dictated and filtered through other people's lenses, specifically in the realms of single fatherhood, which is what I experienced most. A lot of fathers feel like dealing with the court system has alienated them to a point that doing the work to be a successful and good father becomes too much when you have to fight against the system, fight against the mother, and not be appreciated at the same time. However, like I said, I think we're going through a critical transformation because I think that narrative is spinning. The Friends of the Court office and the prosecuting attorney office, which whom I'm partnering with, as I stated, are both actively trying to change the narrative that was centered around their organizations and be more of a help towards fathers. And like I said, I personally know more good fathers than I've ever known any bad fathers throughout the course of my life. It's all about giving those dads the opportunity and some of the same resources that our counterparts have when it comes to this parenting thing so that we can be successful.
100%, I agree. And I think that it's such a big thing, because I think that the mother is an important role, the father's an important role, but how often do we see, the moms taking the brunt majority of the workload? And I have friends, who have children whose fathers chose not to be around. And so I think there's an automatic bias towards men and towards fathers, especially, unwed families and whatnot as well. So you see all those YouTube videos about like child support court cases where the judge sides with the father, and everyone's like, oh yeah, finally sides with the dad. And that's a silly thing that unfortunately does get skewed. And so I'm glad that you're trying to help work against that. So with All Things Fatherhood, it's access to resources, it's a support network, it's helping men understand their place within their child's life and helping them achieve what they want to, correct?
Correct.
I love that so much. I think about the experience of being a dad, and we just talked about this with my previous guest, but I don't know how your experience with your dad informed how you are as a parent. But I think about my experience growing up with the stepdad who was essentially my father from age 4 until now. I think about having a biological father who was not present, who chose addictions, who chose an easier life than being with me. And then I think about how it affects my ability to be a parent now. And I'm sure you have those things as well. But I think about my dad, my stepdad, who I love, who was always supportive, always there when he could be. He was also the main supporter of the family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So my dad was present when he could be, but he was also somebody who was working so we could have food on the table and the mortgage paid. Thinking about your own experiences having a father or growing up, like how has that informed and how is it different from kind of how you see fatherhood nowadays?
So I'm glad you asked that question, honestly. First of all, it's my father's birthday today. Rest in peace to him. He was murdered when I was 15 years old. And so I had what I would like to call a really good relationship with my father, but my father was a troubled man. Him and my mother was a single mother. They were not together for most of my life. He was in and out of jail and prison, but he tried his very best to be the best example of a father he could be. He showered me and my brother with love and care, and anybody who knew him knew he loved his boys, right? So that experience alone with him, the love that I received from him, is something that pushed me today to be the best father as possible. He struggled with addictions and his own troubles and his problems within his own life, stuff that I didn't obviously learn about until later as I grew up as an adult. But what I understood most is that he tried, right? He did his very best that he could at the time with the knowledge and information that he had. And one of the things when I created Generational Fatherhood, the understanding of what his life was like when he was a child. His parents died before I was born, right? Both his mother and his father. And so what was his upbringing like, and why did he choose certain paths that he went down, right? And sometimes we look at life from a lens that we live in instead of the life and times of what other people was going through at that time and what knowledge they had and received. And I can sit here today, and we both can sit here today and say, we have a wealth of knowledge to help us be better parents, right? Yeah. My dad and prior generations, they pretty much was taught to be good fathers, like by verbal, like you're supposed to do this or provide for your family. But it wasn't necessarily, specifically in my community, something that I want to say how the way that I am as a dad today, very active, involved, that it was necessarily encouraged for them at that time. It was more of go out, get the money, spend time with your kids, right? Like kind of like you indicated with your stepfather, where he did a lot of the working and everything and your mom got to stay at home or whatever. Modeling is obviously extremely important. You have to see positive examples in fatherhood, whether that's through a father figure, role model, stepfather, in order to become something positive when you become an adult, whether that's male or female, right? And I think for me, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a church with a lot of other great men. My neighbors who were like family to me, Greg Shanklin, he was a positive influence on my life. From my football coaches and basketball coaches, right? I had a lot of different examples and people who pushed me along the path to try to be a good man first, right? And then becoming a parent at 18, you don't know. There's no handbook for any of it. But learning from my dad that be there and love those kids no matter what was something that I really did take to heart. And I just wanted to be a better example than what he was. I never wanted to raise kids out of wedlock, although I ended up doing that. Yeah. I'm currently married and just had a 2-year-old. My son has just turned 2 a month ago, or actually he's 25 months old now, as of today, ironically. So, you know what I mean? The experiences and the things that I witnessed growing up have ultimately shaped who I am today as a man and as a father for the better, I would say. So
I love that so much. I think about my experiences I had. And I don't mean to belittle my biological father by any means, because somewhere along the line I realized, again, with your dad, did my biological father, love me? Of course he did. Did he know everything that I needed as a child that he should have been as a dad? No, not really. My stepdad once said, he's like, the best thing he could have done for you, was stay out of your life, because I grew up in Flint, and the Flint life is a whole thing. My stepdad said, yeah, the best thing he could have done was stay away from you and like not influence you. I said, but inversely, I said, he made the choice to not be present, but he could have also made the choice and said, hey, this kid needs me, so I'm going to really work hard to fight against what I so naturally want to do, which is be kind of selfish and be my own thing. So I think the beauty of being older as fathers now ourselves is hindsight and being able to be more gracious and forgiving of those things we had. And I'm sure, like, you had no control over your dad's passing, but I'm sure for a long time you were like, man, like, why couldn't he be what I needed him to be at the right time, and why is he not here now?
yeah, exactly. I do feel that. I felt it today.
Yeah.
Right. I've spent 26 years without my father, and I ask all the time, pretty much daily, like what that life would look like if he made better decisions and choices in his life personally. Not saying that he didn't like put us first, but like you said, a kind of bit of selfishness or whatever. But again, not judging or anything like that. But I can't help but wonder what life would look like at times if he was still alive, if there were different choices that were made in his own personal life with my mother, how those things would have turned out for the better. Because one thing I didn't mention in this situation, and it's the tale of two stories, but my brother and I are a year and a half apart. His birthday is June 9th. My brother is doing 27 years in prison. My brother, not that my father introduced us to his lifestyle, but it wasn't something that he could necessarily keep away from us in retrospect, I guess you can say. And then just some of the environment that we were growing up. And me and my brother went down two totally different paths, right? And while my father encouraged us both to do better than him, like I said before, Blink is extremely important. And so what a child sees is what he's going to ultimately understand. And those are typically sometimes the paths you end up going down. And so I hope with the work that I'm doing, I am encouraging people to make better choices when it comes to being a father and a parent, and just trying to give them a space, an opportunity to have a community, because a lot of fathers, for whatever reason, one reason or another, don't like to open up too much to each other. And we take on this challenge alone when we don't necessarily have to. It's a lot easier, I've found myself, when you can be around like-minded people that can help you along the path, some who may have the same experiences as you and some who has different, because everybody's aspect and walk is unique to them and very much important in the shaping of this narrative of fatherhood.
Yeah, 100%. You were talking about my feelings. We live in an era where people are pretty enlightened about their mental health and they pursue counseling therapy. But for so long, there was such a stigma about men's mental health, about toxic masculinity, about how you can't let anybody, don't cry, be a man, suck it up. But I think that there's a space now where we're starting to show men like, hey, you have an experience, you're a father, you have your own struggles, and to walk around them to pretend they don't exist, it doesn't do anybody any good, and it doesn't teach your kids necessarily what they need to know. Do you have any thoughts about mental health, about toxic masculinity and things like those?
So I'm very, very big on mental health. Yeah. I have gone to therapy and counseling throughout the course of my life, post 30s. Before that, I would say I was arrogantly defiant against counseling, therapy, and all that type of stuff. I'm not one that I would say necessarily agrees with the term toxic masculinity, but I recognize and understand why it exists, sure. Right?
Yeah.
But I do believe that protecting and improving your mental health is very much important. The way things were pushed on us as a child by society, to young boys specifically, for me is inherently wrong, right? Teaching us not to feel, not to cry, to suck it up, all those things. While I do believe there are times when that is necessary, it created a void in a lot of men. And that is unfortunate. I do believe, like I said, today we live in an age of information, so more men, I believe, are trying in that regard to be more emotionally intelligent, more emotionally open, available, and vulnerable. But it's still a tall task, because a lot of men still feel alienated in that sense of society, where if they do open up or if they are vulnerable, that vulnerability and openness could be used against them or weaponized. And that's the hard part about toxic masculinity, because there is a sort of danger to vulnerability as a man, but I also feel like you do yourself a disservice if you aren't allowing yourself to be vulnerable. So
that I couldn't have said that better myself. I think about, and the vulnerability too kind of feeds into that bias we talked about earlier, about the bias with men in the legal system and the societal thing. I'm thinking about the biases, mental health. What other common challenges do you feel that we see with fathers in our community?
So I have this thing that I call an ownership model, right?
Sure.
And I say partnership over ownership. And a lot of times, and especially in the work that I do, fathers often feel like they're second-class citizens, right? And it's like, for whatever reason, one way or the other, mothers, I'm not saying they personally feel this way, but the way society makes it feel is that they take ownership over a child, and that you really don't have a right or say over your kid, right? And I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that I think a lot of just society faces, right? Instead of an ownership model idea of what parenting looks like between mom and child, I think we need to get back to a more partnership model where things are equitable, and we look at that from a lens where, yes, we understand that mothers do the brunt of the work when it comes to child bearing and birth, right? We know that, we do understand that, but we do want to be treated fairly in the realms of raising children, right? The idea of having to fight for your right to be a parent as a father is utterly ridiculous, if I'm being honest with you. No man should ever have to jump through hoops just to be able to see his child. And that is one of the biggest challenges that a lot of fathers face. It's burdensome. It can become problematic. But I think if we can focus more on trying our best to work with each other, stop viewing each other. Failed relationships happen. Yeah, they do. I don't know what the current divorce statistics are, but they've been high for a very long time. A lot of relationships fail. More kids are being born out of wedlock. We have to come to a place of understanding that we need each other, man and woman, when having these children and raising them, and that we need to allow each other grace to be able to be better parents. No mother as a parent is perfect, and no father as a parent is perfect. But if both parties are trying, we need to continue to focus on making that aspect of work. And right now, that's somewhat of a challenge that too many men as fathers are having to face, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, well, that's so valid, though. I think about just the egos of people who I know in my circles of friends who are divorced, who have contentious divorces or have things like that. And yeah, I think really when it comes down to is like, it's about your kid. It's not about you. It's not about how that person did you wrong or how whatever happened. It's okay, that is done now. So how can you take who you are, all the stuff that was messy between the two of you, pull it out of the equation and just put love into that kid, love and support, and give them both parents. So that's really important as well. Yeah, I think that's really, really great information and really great things you're doing with All Things Fatherhood. Because it's so critical. And I think that, again, every parenting journey, every fatherhood journey is different, and we also can't ignore the place of father figures. I know that not everybody, like you mentioned earlier, you had coaches, you had church people. Father figures also have a place as well. Not everyone is called to be a dad, but a lot of people can be called to step up and help men and help young men understand their place in the world and help them succeed.
I 100% agree. Father figures are very much ideal. I don't know if I am the man today that I am without father figures in my life. My mentor is Dennis Triggs, and we call each other bro, but he's also been like a father figure to me. You know what I mean? And so we have no blood relation or anything like that, but I can go to him for advice at any time. He was a football coach of mine at the time that my father passed, and I was going to quit football. Showed up on my doorstep with some other coaches basically telling me I'm not quitting football, right? Like, this is a good path for you and stuff like that, and convinced me to continue on that. And I end up going to college to be able to play football, right? And so just having people like that in your life that step up for you, right, that won't give up on you is important. And he's a father figure, right? Like all the other coaches. I mean, I am a father figure to two children of my wife's that aren't biologically mine. I 100% hate the term stepfather. I do not like it whatsoever. I prefer to be called a bonus dad, but I have to set a positive example for them as well, right? They are my children. And so while we may not share the same biological makeup, right? It's important that I be a father figure to them and show them right from wrong and give discipline when it's necessary, but more importantly, emote and show them love and emotion and care and what vulnerability looks like, and also show them how a man is supposed to love a woman, because that's also a key aspect of fatherhood that gets missing in this equation.
That is so good too. And I think about, again, like, yeah, I don't call my stepdad, he's dad. And yeah, I'm so grateful. And it sounds like, for your experiences too with having father figures, and as a stepdad, but I think about, yeah, for me, there was never that cliche, step kids, step parent relationship. It was just love. And he loves me as much as my siblings who are his blood children. I think that's really special as well. One thing I wonder too, with your work at All Things Fatherhood, obviously you came into this mission with your experiences as father, and you kind of recognize some challenges in the community. How has your work in this organization in turn changed you as a father?
It has made me, I would say, more aware of who I am as a man and as a father. It has made me want to be, even though I've always felt like I was attentive to my family and children, but it has made me more attentive, right, to my wife, understanding her role in our parenting journey together. And it has just opened my eyes to, even more so, to the realities of just some of the struggles that a lot of men face that they just don't talk about. And I'm glad that I'm in this space and can offer an opportunity for some of these fathers to be able to express themselves and to help them in a lot of ways. So I would say that that's probably the gist of it for me.
I love that so much. If you could give one piece of advice to fathers, whether that's a first-time father or a well-established father, what's one piece of advice you would give somebody?
Can I separate those two?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So to new fathers, I would say be patient with yourself. Do the work. Don't give up. It's going to be challenging at times. It is going to be difficult at times, but you need to be patient with yourself, and you need to be focused on what the journey what it looks like for you as a father, especially depending on age. Being a young father is tough. With no financial resources, you'll probably feel like you got to have it all figured out, and you will not. So in that regard, be patient. To seasoned fathers, whether you're in a relationship with the kid's mother or not in the relationship with the kid's mother, my good pal Curtis Myers said it best in our film: never give up on them kids. It does not matter what happened in your relationships. Your child is the priority, and putting them first and making sure that you are doing your part as a father and showing up for them is ideal. It's key. I hate to put this amount of pressure on you, but your child's success as an adult depends on the man you are.
Yes.
So that's my advice.
That's brilliant. Clay, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate having you here. Are there things coming up that All Things Fatherhood has going on that you want to plug for us or anything?
Yeah, so Sunday the 15th, on Father's Day, we are having a free community barbecue. Last year, we kept it private to some of the members in the group, but this year I have opened that up to the public. So you can register for that on our website. We are asking that you register because I would like to know the numbers so I can make sure I have an appropriate amount of food. So www.allthingsfatherhoodinc.com. You can register for that on there. We're in the pre-planning stages for a fairly large event that I am hoping to pull off, fingers crossed, but it's going to be a March for Fatherhood and doubling as a back-to-school giveaway. So I'm looking to get about 100 fathers and father figures with their children to go on a little march with me, preferably through downtown. I can't really give too much details of what I'm trying to pull off, and hopefully city planning will approve it. But yeah, that's one of the big things that I'm aiming for in August, September at the latest. And then we have our winter ball December 16th. And so it's labeled as a daddy-daughter dance. It's going to be at Marina's Event Center from 4 to 9 p.m. It is open and free to the public. We are planning on having a horse and carriage ride and a lot of different activities for families. Again, it is labeled as a daddy-daughter dance, but I want this to be an all-inclusive situation, so I want mothers to bring their sons. It's one of our signature events. And so those are pretty much the major things. We do have our proactive fatherhood program that will be kicking back off in the fall. There will be more details to roll out on our website about that coming up soon. But those are some of the things that we got for the rest of the year.
That's so great. We'll make sure to link your information and all your socials and stuff in the episode description as well. Clay, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And for those of you tuning in, thank you for joining us today, and we will talk to you next time.